Hello, America. Well, you know, the American dream of owning a home is still a reality, but you know, owning a home to some people can be quite daunting. It can be overbearing, and in some cases, it can be scary. But you know, I can tell you from my experience that owning a home is going to be a lot cheaper than renting. So, you know, I know when you are wanting to buy a home, you know, there's things that are going to happen. You're going to have to go in front of a lender or a banker or someone and reveal all your financials and your personal life so that they can qualify you to buy a home. But you know, it's worth it in the end. It's worth it, and to some people that's easy. To some people that can be quite daunting and scary. But you know what? Don't take my word for it. We have some really expert people here today that are going to help us understand what it's like to buy a home and the mortgage industry. And leading our podcast today is our amazing CEO, owner, broker of Show Vegas Realty, Anessa Shahinian, and she is going to introduce our fabulous guest for today, Anessa.
Thank you so much, Graham. Hello, everyone. So I'm really honored today to have at our brokerage Tom Amberson. He's been my personal lender for all my transactions that I have done, and also for hundreds and hundreds of clients. We did together for a duration of 16 years. I first met Tom at Century 21 Consolidated through my first broker, Betty Leal, that I'm forever grateful. The lady is a legend. Maybe I should interview her one day too. That would be awesome. But just like, yeah, Thomas Amberson, and he's been in business for 28 years.
Actually, now this is my 33rd year. Since 1990 was my first year when I got licensed in the business. So, goes by fast.
Thank you. That's amazing. And one of the things that I would love to ask you is what keeps you motivated to stay in business for so many years?
Well, the main thing that motivates me every day is we have the ability in our industry, whether it's a real estate agent or a lender, to help people get their dream home. Now, it could be an individual buying their first home, or it could be a couple that is starting a family, or everybody has different situations. But we have the ability to let people find their dream homes.
Now, 33 years, that's a lot of years.
Yes.
And I'm 25 forever. So, how much has it changed? Does it become easier? Is it harder? What are the aspects that are no longer even exist? Like my first mortgage was negative amortization.
Okay.
Do they even exist anymore?
No.
Thank God.
No. So as far as the market, over 30 years, it's constantly changing. It's constantly changing from the real estate aspect, and it's constantly changing from the lending aspect. From the lending aspect, there's new programs that come on that we use as tools to help buyers. And then there's programs that we had 10, 15 years ago that do not exist. Some of them were misused that caused problems, like the negative amortization, but there were other tools that lenders had to help people depending upon their specific situation. As far as the real estate market, it's constantly changing. Sometimes we have a seller's market, which we have had the last several years. It's been heavily weighted towards the sellers. There have been times that we've had a buyer's market. And it has to do with supply and demand. Right now, the supply of homes is very little. So the sellers, the few sellers, they're kind of controlling the market. When there's a lot of sellers, you know, there's been times that you drive down the street and can't go 2 blocks without seeing a bunch of signs. There weren't enough buyers. The buyers were in control. Sometimes we have a flat market where it's pretty even. So that's usually the best market for both people. And the market is constantly changing. I'm seeing some evidence of the market starting to shift now, the last couple of years, it's been so overly weighted towards the sellers. I mean, I had clients that there was 35, 40 people bidding on one house. That's how many buyers. So some people had to make several offers to get one accepted
Yes.
because of the imbalance. Well, I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, and this is just the beginning, that there are actually some price reductions coming in the market.
Mhm.
That's the first sign when you start seeing that some of the sellers, the price they're asking is too high for what the market will dictate, so they're bringing it down, okay? The more that they do price reductions, the more it's gonna balance out.
Righty. What's your next great question? He's good with questions.
No, you know, Tom, at the moment, as you were saying that, you know, our demand is there, but the supply is not there at the moment. So how would you advise new home buyers, or like, I mean, people new to buying a home, how would you advise them to go about preparing themselves to purchase this home?
Okay.
Because they, you know, to a lot of people, it's
From
pretty,
the lenders,
it's pretty scary for them to start the process, and the process starts with going to see a lender or a banker.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you kind of, you know, help them get to that first stage and get over the anxiety that they might have of having to give you all this information and
Yes. So, especially now, generally the process when you buy a new home is you're negotiating a contract with the builder, and that's when they start building the home. So it may take anywhere from a year to a year and a half for that completion of the home. Well, the market from a financing standpoint can change an awful lot in a year to year and a half.
There's nothing you can log.
Not
can
for,
get
not for,
approved.
you can get a pre-approval. Most of the lenders
They're gonna
will
look at
do a
it again.
pre-approval based off of the current situation, okay? But things change. In the next year, year and a half, somebody may go out and buy a new car. It's gonna change their
Change their job.
financial situation. So the best advice I always give them is not only sit down with a lender, but I'm a little biased, I would say sit down with the right lender.
Sit down with Tom.
Because not only do you want to go over the numbers and be pre-approved, you kind of want to start putting together a budget. Because when you buy a new home, there's different expenses than buying an existing home. Most of the builders will do landscaping in the front, but not the back. So you got a budget for what you're gonna do in the back. You're gonna get their base home, and then there's all kinds of upgrades where it's flooring, cabinets,
Oh, yeah.
carpentry. So you have to build all those numbers in. So one of the things that I do is not only do I do the pre-approval, but I help them put together a budget. Because we have a year, year and a half, I have time to work with them to put them into a better financial position.
Mhm.
So some of the people I've worked with, I'm putting a budget together where in the next year, they're paying down or even paying off their credit cards.
Mhm.
Well, now that they don't have those
Excellent.
payments, if there's some fluctuation in the market, they can financially handle it.
Okay.
And just making them be aware that you don't want to increase your debt.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of things happen, you know, life happens in a year, year and a half. So there's no perfect situation, but the more that you can plan,
Better.
the better decisions that you can make for your family.
One thing I wanted to like praise you literally, because as a broker I have agents who also have their lenders they work with and their choice of lenders, and we have buyers that come in with the lenders they pick, and I have seen so much, and comparing with your work, comparing with how you would always, like to the penny, correct, at the beginning when my clients go through a process of literally just getting pre-approval, you were able to know almost to a penny how much their mortgage is gonna be, including taxes, insurance, and homeowner association, like approximately asking me which property we're putting an offer and how much the taxes and HOA is, and calculating that end number and never playing that switch and bet game on them.
Mhm.
So for me, from bottom of my heart, thank you so much, because I cannot stress enough how much this is happening all day, every day, and you want to eliminate that for sure, hands down, Tom will make sure that you don't have that roller coaster effect, because it's just so mean when that happens, when you're at the table signing papers and all of a sudden your mortgage is $200 more every month for next 30 years than you were initially told. It's big. First of all, it takes away that moment of a joy where you're supposed to sit and really enjoy the momentum that you're buying a property, and now it's all faded with this nasty obsession, and feels like it's $200, but it is a big deal. It definitely is a big deal. So
Yeah.
my question coming back to that is, with new homes, it's, I believe, I don't know if it's happening in Las Vegas, but it is happening in Arizona. Builders are not capping the price.
Yes.
And also, you don't know what the HOAs will be, what the tax will. How you prepare one for something like that, an outcome a year later that they don't know what they might be, even buying the price of the house is not capped on the contract.
Yes. So what you're talking about that builders have started doing recently is adding what's called an escalation clause, where
There's a
if
name
the
for it.
yeah, if the value of the property escalates, they can raise the purchase price.
Yeah.
So when
They can even disqualify at some point, right? Not like it's a
some people
stretching.
may not qualify.
Yeah.
The Las Vegas market last year went up approximately 30%. So, if you're talking about a new home that's $1 million, 30% is $300,000. That's a big difference.
Of course.
So when I do my pre-approvals, I do a lot more in-depth work, because I believe that one of my jobs is to give the buyers as much information as I can so that together we can make the best decision for them. Okay, so I will get copies of the contract from the builder to see if there's an escalation clause,
Oh,
to see if there's a maximum that I'll call them if it's a lot of new homes have an HOA. So how much is their HOA? Some of them in this town, there's 2 HOAs. There's a master and a sub. Some new builds have their regular taxes, and then they have an additional taxes, SIDS or LIDs or Mello-Roos. They call them different names. So I do all that background check so the buyer knows what they're getting into. And then I go through the contract with them and say, okay, here's your purchase price. But if the market changes, you have an escalation clause. This is what it could go up to. This is what your payments may
and
be.
if we can even.
None of us can guarantee what's going to happen in the future. But if you know that, then the buyer has the option of saying, yes, I want that, or no, I don't want that house. That's too big of a risk. So, just like with buying a house is the largest financial commitment anybody's going to make.
Yes.
What else is there out there that you spend this much money on one item?
Shoes.
If you're spending as much on one pair of shoes as you do a house, you better start living in your shoes.
Getting there slowly.
So that's why it's really important to get all the information so that you can make the correct financial decision
Yes.
for your particular situation for your family, because everybody's
If they
family.
disqualify at the point when, let's say, everything best base price was
Mhm.
$620, and with the escalation cost now they're at $680,
Mhm.
and they can't qualify, do they lose their earnest money deposit?
So depending upon what their contract says, and every builder is different, but most of the builders that I've seen, and this is not all of them, but most of the builders I've seen will collect 50% of the money up front for their deposit, for their options, 50% for their upgrades. If they want a special order, sometimes you have to pay 100% of that. Well, if the builder has ordered all that flooring or a special shower or a sliding glass door that you ordered that's custom,
And you walk away.
and you
it's on
walk away, they're gonna make you pay that.
What's your
Yeah,
question,
You
Mr.?
know, Tom, as we're just talking about this, I realized the importance of having, for a buyer having a professional real estate agent help them through the process of this, to communicate with the lender and with the new home builder. But I'm just thinking, what do you think some of the mistakes are that buyers make when they're buying either a new home or an existing home? So what are some of the things that they generally might trip themselves up?
So from my end, as a lender, the biggest mistakes that I see is them, it's not necessarily that the buyer is lying, but they may not tell you about certain things, okay? The background checks that lenders are forced to do now between your employment history, your credit, your bank accounts, everything that we check, we find out everything. So we're gonna find out. So for me, it's better if you tell me up front, because a lot of times, the vast majority of times, you tell me up front what the issue is, I can figure out a way to help you so that you can still get the house. If we find out towards the end, then everybody's panicked and rushed and, you know, you're planning movers, you want everything to go smoothly and close on time. So the best suggestion that I can tell a buyer is be honest with their lender, okay? And I hesitate to use the word honest because sometimes they just don't remember. One of the early transactions that I did years ago, the husband and wife were referred to me by the real estate agent, met with them, went through all their numbers with their income. They told me what their debts were, all of that information, did the pre-approval. Well, at that time, they told me they had one car loan and it was like $550 or whatever. So I was able to calculate that all into their debt ratio. Well, later on, when all the background checks came back, it ended up that they had 2 car loans. Well, I didn't know. Husband and wife, sometimes that makes sense that they each have a car loan, but it threw their debt ratio out of whack. So I called the buyers, spoke to the husband and said, well, I just got this report and it's showing that you have 2 different car loans. He goes, oh yeah, I forgot about that. We didn't tell you about that. So I said to him, well, this is gonna cause a problem in your debt ratio. And that's all that he said to me. So I called the real estate agent, said, I just found this out. They have 2 car loans. This one, it's causing their debt ratio to be out of whack. I don't know that we're gonna be able to get this done because now their debt ratio is too high. The real estate agent says to me, oh, I knew about that. When I was taking them around, he told me about this second car loan that belonged to his sister. So I ended up calling him back and saying, did you co-sign with your sister on that loan? And he goes, yes. So I said, does she make the payments or you? He goes, she makes the payments. So I was able to get 12 months of canceled checks showing another party making those payments. I was able to take it out of their debt ratio and close the loan. So it was a lot more stressful for everybody involved. If you would have said up front, hey, I co-signed with my sister on this loan, I would have asked him the question. So sometimes those things slip through the cracks, but we generally will find out. The background checks that are done are pretty extensive.
And I just want to put it out there, while you're in a process of purchasing a property, you're not allowed to co-sign for anyone, buy furniture, buy a car, open a credit card, close a credit card, deposit money into your bank account.
Cash. Don't deposit cash.
Even $400 is a red flag, right?
It's the new guideline, they've changed all the time, but the new guideline is any deposits that are 25% or more of your monthly income, we have to document where the money came from. Well, if it's cash, there's no way to prove who the cash came from. I could give you cash and you could deposit into your account. I could give you a cash loan. So lenders hate cash deposits.
Yeah.
But you know, there are all kinds of things that meet the guidelines for down payment and closing costs. You can get a gift from a family member or a charity. So you can get that check and deposit it. We just have to document where it comes from, which is really easy, and do a gift letter. So there are ways of doing that if you're going to deposit money into your account. I've had people that got a year-end bonus or a quarterly bonus. That's absolutely fine. That's your money, that's your income. But if it's a new deposit, we have to document that that's where it is, that you didn't go out and get a loan that you have to repay and then have to include that in your debt ratio. So there's all kinds of ways, and that's why the best thing you can do is talk to a professional lender and say, okay, our down payment and closing costs are, for round numbers, let's say we need 50,000. Well, I only have 40,000, but I know I'm getting a check for 15,000 as a bonus in 2 weeks. Okay, well, we can work with that as long as we know. If all of a sudden new money shows up, then it's a red flag. So just communicate with your lender. Hopefully they're communicating with you and getting you all the information, and make the process as smooth as possible for you.
I suppose.
Don't you think that the biggest factor here also to work with like full-time agents and lenders?
Yeah.
If you have a question and you wanna ask and get an answer, like even if you're thinking, is this wrong, is this right, should I do this, should I not do it? Reaching out to someone who's in the industry and is full-time instead of stuck at work or driving
Yes.
Uber,
Yes.
and you might just not get the answer, right? Because this
Yes.
is an industry that I believe it should be good, 30-40 hours a week that you devote into this.
Yeah, it's definitely an advantage to have a professional working with you, especially a professional real estate agent that's doing it full time, and a lender. And
For sure.
because I know with buyers, people that are buying, they have this perception or this inclination to withhold a bit of information, because I think they have this feeling, I don't really want to tell them too much. I just want to tell them a little bit about my history. I don't want to tell them about that medical bill that I haven't paid for 10 years,
Mhm.
Maybe he won't find that out.
Yeah.
So when someone comes to you to initiate getting a pre-approval for a loan, what are some of the encouraging things you say to them, Tom?
Okay,
You-
so
you sort of-
that's a very good question. Because like I said, I do things a little bit different than most other people. Most lenders that you go to, if you say, I need to get a pre-approval, they're gonna go through your numbers and they're gonna tell you the maximum amount that you can qualify for, okay? I will always give them two numbers. I will give them the maximum that they can qualify for, but then I sit down with them with their budget and what do you feel comfortable with? What payment do you feel comfortable with? Not everybody should be maxing out. So, and it could be, we need to keep our payment here because my wife is pregnant with twins and we're about to have 2 babies in a couple of months that are gonna add to our expenses. So even though we make more money and can qualify for more, we feel more comfortable with a lower payment. So I will always sit down with them and get them, what do you feel comfortable with? And it's really easy to back in. Okay, if we want our payment to be $2,200 a month, $2,500 a month, here's the amount that you can borrow. So once we know your loan amount, then we can add the down payment on top of that, and then your purchase price. And what I found over the years, like I said, I've been doing this just over 33 years. We've had all kinds of ups and downs, and in 33 years, believe it or not, with the biggest financial crisis since the 1920s, I've had one client go to foreclosure. And that was actually back in 1994 in California. He had bought the house a few years earlier, converted it to a rental, and bought a new house with his wife, so it was a rental property for him. And then the earthquake in January of '94 knocked the building down. Well, the value come down, he goes, I'm not spending $60,000, $80,000 to rebuild this thing, and he just walked away from it. So I've actually never had a client that financially couldn't afford it because I spend the time with them. I've always said the worst thing that can happen is somebody call me in 6 months and says, I can't afford the payments. That's the worst thing that can happen to a family. So like I said, I take more time, I put budgets together and all of that because like we said, this is the biggest purchase they're ever gonna make. So they absolutely need a professional real estate agent, they need a professional lender, they need a professional home inspector, all the team that gets put together. It's a big team, termite companies, it could be a pool contractor to inspect a pool. There's so many people that are part of the team, escrow and title, so that you don't have any problems with the title reports.
Yep.
So it
I don't
especially
think we
in this
ever
day and
had
age.
a transaction without a bump. You know, there was not a, like even my own transactions, right? There was always a bump, and I always had a moment when I would get extra emotional.
Well, they say
And Tom will calm me down.
they say the three most stressful things you can do are get married, have a kid, and buy a house. So I've actually had a client that was doing all three at one time.
Oh, God.
So, you know, part of our job, we're
Yeah.
part psychiatrist and tell them that it's gonna be
Well,
okay
I
and
think,
stuff.
I think that's the advantage of having a professional, because there are bumps along the way in everything
are.
pretty much.
Yes,
And by having a professional, they're able to take you over those bumps
absolutely,
and flatten them out again, you know.
absolutely. And after 33 years, I will be the first one to tell you, I do not know everything, but I've seen a lot, so I know how to
Yeah.
negotiate a lot of those bumps and smooth them out, that a lot of times we discuss it, we fix it, the client never knows, because we're able to take care of it. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with the buyer, it could be an issue with the seller or
Yeah,
something.
well,
There's all kinds of things
We
that
can
come up.
see these things coming up as well,
Yeah.
so we can deal with them as they
Yeah,
come
it could
up.
be as simple as the seller on the house hadn't paid their HOA due, so now there's a
Yeah.
lien that we have to get removed, you know? And
Yeah, a
those are-
lot is
those are-
happening on the
Those are
background
simple
that
things
they don't
to fix for professionals.
Yeah,
But if somebody's never been through that and they don't know how to do it, it can cause the transaction to go
Absolutely.
sideways, so.
Absolutely.
Tom, just tell us briefly how the loan process works, like when somebody comes in and gets pre-approved and they put an offer in on a house, they get it all sorted out. So now we're going through the loan process,
Okay.
and you have to
Do
prepare.
we have that much time?
Yes, I can give a quick answer.
No, but you know, you're preparing the loan and everything. It goes from you to an underwriter, okay? And the underwriter is involved with Fannie Mae. Is the underwriter kind of like tied up there?
Well, depending on who the investor is on the loan. Currently, 90% of the loans in this country are sold to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or FHA,
Yeah.
which are quasi-government agencies that set certain guidelines. So the lender that you actually go to does all the work, funds the loan, and then afterwards will sell it to Fannie Mae, and they may continue with the servicing. The servicing is keeping all the accounting of your payments. But the simple way to explain the conveyor belt of a loan is the first part is the application process. So there's an application that has to be filled out, and then based off the buyer's unique situation, there's certain documentation that is needed. So once the application is filled out, then the file goes into the processing department. The processor's job is to get all of that documentation, run their credit report. I refer to it as the Big Four. So the Big Four is we have to get their income information, we have to get their credit information, we have to get their assets for their down payment and closing costs. Those three have to do with the buyer. The fourth thing is the property. So there's title reports, there's appraisals, there's all kinds of things to get the property approved. So all of that stuff is gathered in the processing department. Once we have all that, the file gets packaged and sent to the underwriter. The underwriter's job is to assign a level of risk, whether the loan should be approved or not. And generally speaking, you're gonna get one of three answers. They're either gonna say, no, they don't qualify, yes, they qualify, or by far the most common is, yes, they qualify, but these are the additional conditions that we need, okay? And sometimes there's major conditions, sometimes there's minor conditions. A minor condition might be, we need an updated pay stub. We have a pay stub, so we know how much they make, we just need an updated one because that one's over 30 days old. That's generally something that's minor. There may be something that may be more major, having to do with the house or whatever. So once all of the conditions are cleared, we'll get what's called a CTC, which is clear to close, and the underwriter will send the file to the closing department. At the closing department is where they prepare the final loan documents that get sent to the title company for the buyer to sign. The buyer signs, the loan documents are returned, the buyer brings in, usually by wire, the balance of their down payment and closing costs. Once the title company has that, they will contact the lender to have the lender wire their money. Once they have all the money, they set up the recording, which is when the new deed gets recorded at the county recorders. That's the public record that you now own the house. So if somebody comes and knocks on the door and says, this is my house, the county has a record, a public record of who owns the house. So that's the short version. So there's all kinds of bumps that go through there, and depending upon the market we're in, when it's really busy, I've seen it take 2 to 3 weeks to get an appraisal back. Right now, it's slower, so the appraisers are getting them back quicker. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have developed their own valuation model. So on a lot of the houses, because they have enough information on those houses, because they've done years of work in that community, sometimes we get an appraisal waiver where we don't need to have the appraisal. Obviously, if we get that and we can save the buyer the cost of the appraisal, it's fantastic.
Right?
It's really tough on new homes. You don't see them very much on new homes unless the buyer's putting a lot of money down. The buyer's putting 50% down, which I've seen. We have people coming from California that are selling their houses there, so they have a lot of cash, so they're putting a big cash down payment. So on those types of homes, sometimes we'll get the appraisal waiver. But on a new home, they don't really have the history of what the value is of the property.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always interested me as to the fact that we have the lender sending the file to the underwriter and the underwriter picking things up. Would the lender does the lender not really know what the underwriter is looking for when he prepares the file? Because I suppose I'm trying to say, do we need an underwriter? Like,
Well,
if everyone's on the same page.
The answer is yes and no. Okay. The better that I do my job, when I interview the people and know their background, know their unique situation, I know what to ask for. Okay. Because I know what the guidelines are. I know what the underwriter's going to ask for.
Rules, regulations.
Unfortunately, a lot of the people in my business don't know all the Fannie Mae guidelines, Freddie Mac guidelines. So their underwriting guideline is well over 5,000 pages. But after so many years, I've seen things come up. And a lot of times what will happen is the guideline will say this, but I know based off of the buyer situation, they can't document that, so I can document it another way. So I will call the underwriter and say, I can't get this, but here's how I document it. And usually when I explain it to them, they will allow me to document it that way, and it goes through smoothly. So most of the conditions that I get, a lot of times they're very minor. Now there's going to be some standard boilerplate conditions on every loan, okay? One of the conditions for somebody buying a new home is we have to verify their final funds, what they send to escrow for the balance of their down payment. Well, that's not done until the end. So they will wire the money to title, title will wire me a receipt, and as long as it's coming from their bank account, we're all good. So there are certain things like that that are always going to appear, but depending upon the complexity of it, depending upon the time frame, because sometimes I'll ask a client, I need this, 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 and this. Sometimes they get it to me right away. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 weeks and we're running out of time. So I got to get the file to the underwriter so we can close on time, knowing the underwriter's going to ask for that. So every situation is different, but my job is to make the conditions as less as possible to make it as easy for everybody going through the process.
Even that little thing that you said, because it rang a bell, I remember it happened with us when the buyer final closing funds came from the cousin's account.
Could have.
And how we really quickly within a day were able to get all situated before it goes to the underwriter, because Tom knows the underwriter will ask for it. So this is why again and again, coming back to working with people with experience. And the name of our show, right? It's Legends of Real Estate, and Tom is for sure a legend of real estate.